Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
The following video contains content some viewers might find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed here are not facts and are nothing more than entertainment. The views and opinions are not facts and do not represent the views and opinions of Xirtus or our channel, and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views of the guests, YouTube, Google, mainstream media, society, or civilization at large, or anybody. Viewer discretion is advised.
My microphone better yet? Okay. All right. I want it. So wait, like, to be fair, because they tell you that in shows you have to talk about things people care about. So just really quickly, sports. There are teams that are winning. And okay, all right, just wanted to cover that. Anyway, good to have you guys here. Wednesday Ultra. Giant, you, Tiffany, how's it going?
Good.
Seth, what's up?
What's up, everyone?
It's very nice. So, but seriously, like Seth, I was thinking, like, do you think that free will can coexist in a universe governed by physical laws, or does determinism negate the possibility of genuine choice?
Oh, it's even worse than that. Both determinism and indeterminism, they both destroy free will. Free will is impossible in every possible universe.
Ooh, you're just full on like you're like a Calvinist now. You're like, okay.
You can't escape the futility of
Who
existence.
Who has feelings? Who goes first? Tiffany or Giant? What do you guys think? Free will.
Why is it that you feel that there's no way that there's free will? Is it because it's just not in the way that people think of free will, or
yeah, so basically, yeah, I can flesh it out a little bit so you have something to work with there. Basically, I think that free and will are fundamentally contradictory. So the term free will is self-contradictory, and self-contradictory things, they can't exist, like square circles, married bachelors, hot coldness. None of this can exist in a logical universe because the law of non-contradictions prohibits the existence of self-contradictory things. And that's basically the easiest way to put it.
So you're saying that will destroys freedom to have a will?
Yes, yeah. And so the reason, now you have to get into definitions.
Will is determinate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Will means you're like filtering down, you've got all this potential and you're constricting all the potential to do what you want, right? That process of constriction is the opposite of freedom. Freedom is anything is possible, and the will is, I don't want anything to be possible. I want what I want to be possible.
You can direct the actions, but you still have to ultimately do something. Will is congruent with action.
Yeah, but so like the will can exist, but can a free will, right? Can you describe the will as free? That's where the problem is.
I would say that an element of free will would also be the ability to choose and constrict the different paths into be the one that you want.
So I would just describe that as the will. The will is you're using your values, you're using your culture, you're using your principles, and you're filtering your options for what you want. That's just a will. I don't know why we need to call it free.
That seems like a semantics debate.
It is, largely. It is a semantics debate.
But it seems like a fair one. The idea of free will is different than will. Like the idea of, because it implies that you're not, like free will implies that you're not inheriting your will from, like you just said, from your nature, from your social values. You don't really understand why you're choosing these things on this like genetic or subconscious level of media manipulation. You might be like, oh, I really want chicken nuggets or something like that. Like, do you? I don't know. It could be that this is just programmed into you.
Yeah, I feel that the will is, like in the name William is saying that the I am, which is God, is really the will and ultimately collects all the information. We're all a piece of it, expressing it in this world. So I believe that it feeds back from itself and then engages with creating us to start doing its will, but in our own form, in the way that we will react, because we're individuals that have like zodiac signs, certain types of energies that we bring to the situation. So I get what you're saying, where it's something that we're constantly engaging and getting all these influences, and then we're directing that will, but it's ultimately God's.
It does feel like there's a lot of subconscious determination. Like people who use the term free will about themselves, I feel like are more manipulated often. I don't know if that's like a fair stereotype. It's like, I have more freedom. You're like, do you? Like, I see that often.
Actually, that specific line of thought, Andreas, is actually what gives Seth's perspective credence. I've been thinking about this a lot lately as the country basically disintegrates. It's because, call it whatever reason with Robert Mueller and all the occultism, dumbing down things with Common Core math, dumbing down the American population for like 3 generations at this point. So everyone is working with, and me too, like there's lots of stuff that I'm low resolution with, like my hand right now. There's lots of people that live their entire lives with such low resolution living that you can definitely argue that they don't have free will. So it's hard to even argue that a society could even be built that could facilitate it and prove it, because we're in the most free, most prosperous point of human history, and people are more dumbed down than ever. So people are directed a lot. But there's a consequence to that, because I was reflecting on this too, because I'm trying to write a novel, so I'm focusing on story archetypes a lot. If the abandonment of Hollywood by showing people greater archetypes, hero archetypes, really making people victorious and having to work through things through the dumbing down of our movies and media, you see it. It doesn't have to be giving up church. People have given up on our culture. People have given up on seeking out things to be heroic about. And so they just kind of like, well, everyone's kind of decaying. And we see that across every strata in every generation.
There's a few good things happening, like in Japan right now. I noticed this, like Final Fantasy Tifa. Do you know Tifa versus Antifa? You know, this is basically the new this is the new Final Fantasy Tifa character, Tifa Lockhart. And there's no way this isn't a synchronicity. This is definitely a synchronicity. I mean, how much of it is intentional? 20% chance, but still, like, there's something to this, because people are like, this is somehow very important, because if you've seen video game characters for a long time, they've been like made ugly and like not appealing in any way, and they're starting to turn to this idea of people want, you know, to see symmetry in the world. Like women want to see beautiful women, like people want to see cathedrals and castles. You know, these things are all related. Symmetry matters, and we get away from that and we see like tract houses like in the middle of, you know, crack dens and things like that, and call that acceptable. We've lost the care for beauty, right? So I don't know. Free will is a thing also where it's like, are you headed towards a goal with freedom? Like, is freedom supposed to be expansive? Are you talking about freedom in terms of phenomenological diversity? You're saying like, okay, I can see all of these choices, and from that, I know my choice is the best choice? Or like, what does freedom even mean to you? Is it just range of choice? Or
so in my opinion, the most important question in the free will debate is the question of, where do your values come from, right? You're using your values to make these choices, but you're getting puppeteered by your values. And so you need to understand, am I getting this from culture? Am I getting this from my genes? Like, what influences are upon me? And it ultimately boils down to, your brain is making the decisions, right? That's, everything boils down to your brain. Where does beauty come from? The brain is inventing, oh, I like something beautiful. Well, it's because there's an arc of evolutionary history where beautiful things are beneficial. So your brain programs you to like beneficial things, right? Things taste good because they're beneficial, same thing. And the problem is, with the free will debate, is everything in your brain follows the laws of physics, right? And so if your brain makes your decision, and if the laws of physics are puppeteering your brain, that makes your decisions, you're just a puppet of physics, right? There's no free will under that description.
Yeah.
nobody?
Oh, no.
I mean, I get what he's saying. I mean, I don't really have an argument because I agree with that. So
I think to an extent I agree. I think there's there's nuances to it. So the idea that you don't change is, I feel like people do with more information often change. But the idea that you need more information to know the correct answer, I don't think that is necessarily true. I also, like, in terms of this idea, like symmetry is evolutionarily rewarding, it's then very interesting that we've spent the last 3 or more, maybe 9 generations kind of deviating from symmetry, from cathedral divine principle architecture, so that we're trying to unwire that, right? And I wonder what do you think is the future? And then if we're able to remove some of these environmental programmed epigenetic desires and, you know, principles and
I don't think that
values.
I don't think that it's something that you can, you know, deprogram from us. I think that beauty is always going to be apparent, and we're always going to find value and beauty in things that are balanced and that work well. You can try to program people into liking asymmetrical and all this stuff, but it's only going to last for so long. It's a trend. We're supposed to go through I believe we're supposed to go through phases of seeing things done incorrectly, and they might be trendy for a while because it's supposed to catch on and we're all supposed to be influenced by it, but eventually we will throw away whatever's bad out of it, and it'll always just come down to the most beautiful versions of that. Like, we have to see all versions and see the most beautiful version within that version, and then after that you move on to something else. We're going to go through, you know, every sort of thing, because there's a lot of things to go through in this world, but I don't think that it will discourage us from seeing beauty. We'll always recognize the actual true thing. We're looking.
I agree.
Like, some
I
people,
don't think
these millennials and Zoomers, though, watching movies and they can't appreciate something. I don't know. It's dangerous. We're close to that. It could happen.
They'll phase in and phase out, just like you go through phases in your life. These kids will get over that and start recognizing more and more beautiful things. You know, I didn't recognize music when I was young. It took me a while to really go back and look at where the history of music, and then you start respecting all these and seeing how detailed all these musicians that you thought were just, you know, oh, those are old guys or whatever, you know. So
I don't think you can actually fully program people to not see beauty or even to change it. My reason for asserting this is because of the hatred of the activists that are destroying the paintings and such. I think that it's innate in us to recognize beauty, and I think that they destroy things because they're resentful because they can't create beautiful things like our forefathers did. And one thing I was thinking about in the example when Giant was talking about interpreting beauty and feeding into it, and Seth's thing about choosing it or anything like that. I got to babysit my cousin's toddler a couple months ago, and that was super fun. We watched The Lion King on their Disney Plus, and she was like, whatever, I'll watch it. But it's a great archetypal movie. It's a perfect archetypal explanation. But she was like, yeah, it's pretty good. And she got kind of engaged with the songs. However, I noticed a shift in her when we then watched Beauty and the Beast. And if you guys remember from Jordan Peterson's lectures that the Beauty and the Beast archetype, the beauty who tames the beast, that's the female archetype. It's the ultimate female archetype. And I wonder if like our standards of beauty are somewhat tied to our own emotional state and emotional preference. And obviously as a little girl, she would be more in tune with the female archetype than the son who returns to become king.
Yeah, a slight different interpretation on Beauty and the Beast, but I don't know if you guys wanted to address
I'm into that. I was gonna say I got my interpretation, like, because women are the beast, right? Like, because like they understand the primal rage emotion so strongly that they're able to like help the beast through it. They're like, look, kid, like you're new at this. Like, I'm a woman. I've had these feelings, and I don't kill people. Like, you know, I've learned to control it.
If women are the beast, does that make you the beauty, Andreas?
Like the birds, like the male birds, the big
well, technically, beauty is not a feminine word; it's a masculine word. Beautiful or beau, right? So
bureaucracy.
In Spanish, we often say bonito. You know.
Yeah, the woman's name was Belle, right? So it's French, and beau is the masculine form. So that movie was about turning the beastly man into a beautiful man. And her name was Belle. So
Belle means beauty in French. Yeah.
And they focus on the point that the prince was really a beautiful prince. That was like a major aspect of it.
Yeah, masculine. So when it's architecture and stuff like that, that's where the word beau or beauty comes from. Beau X and all this stuff. It's an architecture which is masculine. It's very strong and solid and all that stuff. So it's actually the male word for beauty. male is
Which
the
still
female.
makes sense, because the female in that archetypal story design is the female is supposed to be the hero. So her taking on the masculine role of the hero makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so she's helping the male become less beastly and become more beautiful, and they're probably both doing it to each other, right? They're helping each other in one way or another to come to balance, right? It's about the feminine and the masculine being pulled together and being balanced, right? At least that's how I interpret
Seems
it.
like we're rapidly devolving into postmodernism, where there's infinite interpretations. We can't figure out which is up and which is down.
You know, I'd blame the Jesuits. As a kid, we'd go to church and they'd like tell, like, all right, what are we going to read today? Pick a verse, any verse. And then they just like make it about something completely different. It was amazing every time. It was like so focus on the acorn in this story. You know, yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah,
that's a symbolism. That's creativity in the brain. You've got like an idea over here, and the little tentacles. Oh, this idea connects over to here, and therefore we got symbolism. It's like your brain can make infinite connections.
No, I think with you don't think with Jordan Peterson maps of meaning that's a valuable thing to you don't think that I mean, for instance, the Grimm's fairy tales, right? Like his most precious possessions are like the Quran and the Old Testament Gnostic Bibles. They're focusing on mythology because you can only tell these stories a certain way or else you'll get killed, right? Like either by some fraternity or by a mob, right? Or by the parents.
So I think Jordan Peterson's best counter argument to like the postmodern critique is basically an appeal to evolution, right? Evolution filters out the bad interpretations and filters down to the good interpretations. Good as in promoting
useful
society, promoting sustainability, promoting survival, etc. So yeah, I try to look at everything through an evolutionary lens because to me that's like that's the best lens we have in our modern day. But like along those lines, there's a quote from the philosopher Nietzsche who was talking about beauty. And he said something, well, this is attributed to him. Sometimes things get lost in the sourcing. But basically, the quote is, if you kill a cockroach, you're a hero. But if you kill a butterfly, you're a villain, right? And basically, morality has an aesthetic criteria to it, right? So why is it good to kill cockroaches and bad to kill the butterfly? Why is it good to slay the dragon, but bad to hurt the princess, right? It's because there's evolutionary principles behind all of this. The cockroach gives us disease and hurts our society. The butterfly, it pollinates and gives us crops and benefits our society. So like the way we think about beauty is framed and influenced by this history of evolution, which is puppeteering what we think is beautiful, what we think is good, what we think is moral.
We'll get through this part. I feel better now. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was nice. Travis, we love you.
That was predetermined since the time of the Big Bang to happen.
Yeah, in a sense. See, that's the thing. There's an environmental there's an environmental shift that's really strange that you have to say, like, okay, well, what's the range of things that have to happen? Because obviously things don't have to follow that divine symmetry. We're saying, oh, how cool would it be? Because evolutionarily, when things do that, it's better. And we're already losing shift to that. But things are clearly not always fitting into that divine symmetry. So, like, isn't that kind of just the objective point? Like, we should be trying to make the world more perfect because, I mean, like, religion or otherwise?
Yeah. I'm largely a skeptic of this whole symmetry argument for beauty. But in general, I think we should be pursuing beautiful things. So I agree with you at that level.
Huh. Let's look at some asymmetrical faces. Hold on. What's an example? I mean, just like, really? I mean, isn't
Angelina Jolie is asymmetrical?
I mean, I think they're also just taking faces and they're trying to show, like, if you took half of someone's face and you put it perfectly, like, you can see, like, how symmetrical they would be. You know, just probably call it symmetrical. I don't know. I mean, so you don't think symmetry is important? No.
I agree that symmetry is a factor in beauty, or at least in facial beauty or human beauty, but I don't think it's more than 20%.
Okay, how about carbon? How about carbon? Just like, how about like structures of things, right? You know, structure, atomic nanostructure, divine shape. Like if carbon, diamond, nano, you know, like look at how carbon is arranged, symmetry, structure. If you wanted to have a diamond, you have to have a certain structure of perfect symmetry. If you don't have that, you don't have a diamond. You have like pencil lead, and it's not as good. I mean, it's different, at least, right? So isn't that kind of more like it's beyond evolution? It's physics. Perfection is better.
You on, Andreas?
I do love nano.
I feel like also to get a true grasp of symmetry and beauty and things like that, I'm not the most qualified. You should talk to a real physicist.
Well, Tiff, you also were saying you were reading, though, this book earlier about free will, right? You're talking about the Christian...
There's an element of it. Yeah, I was just I'm reading through Mere Christianity. I'm trying to get to 500 books.
So what in Mere Christianity you were saying, like, it kind of related to that idea of free will, though?
Yeah. If it's not free, then it can't truly be loving. We don't have the option to truly be loving.
Right, yeah. So, in the sense of, like, if you're not making the choice to do the right thing, and it's all just automaton, and you don't have awareness of what's going on. I don't know, Seth, what do you feel about having awareness? Like, do you feel, because if you don't have free will, aren't you kind of saying that you're kind of like a voyeur to your own life? Like, you're kind of being cucked by this whole physics experience. And you're like, I think I'll go here. But you're not really choosing that. You're feeling that because that's the most logical symmetry is your physics and hormones.
Yeah. The way I think of it is, like, I think of it in terms of algorithms, right? In software, in robots, you've got these algorithms where, here's a for loop. I'm going to think about food in this for loop until I eat some food. I've satisfied my goal. I can exit the for loop. Now I'm going to go over here. I got to focus on a different thing over here. While my needs are not satisfied, let's focus on this loop. And so the way I think of it is we are the algorithm. So we feel ourselves moving through these loops. Right? Here's a need. Okay, satisfied. Here's another need. Okay, satisfied. And so we think we're making decisions as we flow through the code of neuroscience. But if you think about a robot, is a robot exercising free will? Robots, they can make choices. They can react to their environment. They can function as agents. They can do lots of complex things. But when it boils down to it, they're deterministically following the path of least resistance through the algorithm. It's not free.
So that's the Tao. And in other words, like, humans are essentially robots. I agree with all those points, but I think that doesn't. So then we need to really describe freedom more still. I still want your qualitative or quantitative understanding of freedom. Because, like, you're saying it's not freedom, but what is freedom really?
Okay, let me pull up. I've been writing about this recently, getting a bunch of definitions ready to go. Do you want me to even share these?
Please do. You can share the screen.
Okay.
Freedom is different than free, right? Also, do you define them differently? Freedom and free? Okay.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Free will definitions. Okay, can you see? You can see this page? Free will definitions?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first definition here is free.
Could you zoom it in, make it a little bigger?
Is that
Thank you.
better?
That's nice. Yeah, that's nice.
So I just extracted 3 relevant definitions from different dictionaries. So one is unconstrained, right? one is independent, free from external control and constraint, and the other is not limited or controlled, right? So if you're combining all these definitions together, synthesizing them together, you've got freedom, or like free as an adjective. It means something is independent, it's unconstrained, it's not limited, it's not subject to external control. And so when we're talking about the algorithm of how our mind works, it doesn't meet any of these criteria. It's not independent of physics. It's not independent of neuroscience. It's not independent of evolution, not independent of your genes, your culture, your parents, your friends, none of that. It's constrained and limited and manipulated, controlled by all of those factors. So that's why, to me, it doesn't seem like a good adjective for the will.
Is that your fan? My God, bro, that's so loud. All right, so but then in other words, you're saying that unconstrained has to be absolute. So if it's not absolute freedom, that's, you know, like unfathomable levels of freedom at that point, because then you're basically, I mean, that's levels of freedom that are God tier. You can realize any imaginary thought instantly or not, you know, like that's the omnipotence. You're talking about omnipotence.
Yeah, to an extent, free is a very strange word, right? It's very strange because it's almost like every possibility is equally possible. That's almost a magical description. And so that's the problem. We're applying a magical description to the will, and the will is not magical.
I mean, so free comes from Old English, which is always a dangerous game, I think, to use Old English definitions and Old English words instead of like a Greek or Latin word like liberty or something. But freo, exempt from, not in bondage, acting of one's own will. You know, it's not necessarily the same as free. I think this is an earlier and probably a better use of that word free. You know, like to have the opportunity or the capacity, you know, like this is probably more of a restrictive case of free because this isn't a scarcity ideology, but still you're thinking of freedom from such a high perspective that it sounds like it has to be omnipotence, and there's already a word for that.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking along those lines. It seems like we have to get above, at the very least, the fourth dimension, but maybe all the dimensions. We, by nature, our own nature, can't understand true freedom in terms of how Seth is describing it, or what its real connotations would be. Being above neuroscience, being above physics, being above our consciousness itself. It would have to, we would have to ascend, you know, to the 10th realm.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, if you go far back enough, you get to the Old English Freo, which is the wife of Odin, so meaning beloved. So like, in other words, freedom has to do with just being beloved by God. Ha!
That's what Tiffany was saying. You can't have love without freedom.
Right. Well, I mean, the idea though of having a lord, like you have to imagine also, like if you're in like a feudal society and you have no privileges, you have no rights, right? The privileges you get are, you know, essentially the capacity to do any little thing. And you have to imagine it from like if you're in a prison, you have to ask for permission to use the bathroom or drink water, to all of a sudden you can walk around the city, you know, and there's laws against people just walking around at this time. Vagabondry, right? Loitering, all these kinds of things. What are you doing here without a job or a reason or a meaning, right?
Don't you know that COVID shutdown is happening?
Yeah, exactly.
So I have some, I want to address your criticism, Andreas. To me, I'm interpreting that as the compatibilist criticism, right? Within the free will debate, there's the incompatibilist, there's the compatibilist, and there's the libertarian, right? So the compatibilist is saying, well, as long as you have like this, as long as you're not in chains, as long as you can do what you want, as long as the society isn't, you know, controlling your behavior, then you have free will, right?
Or you have furthering towards it. It's like a goal.
Right. As long as you don't have an illness that you're you know, Tourette's syndrome, like, oh, that's not free, but oh, this is deliberate. These are deliberate motions, so that's free will, but not this. You know what I mean? That's the compatibilist free will. The problem is, in my opinion, the problem is
Good point.
the word will is the wrong word here. So they're describing free agency, not free will, right? In my opinion, there's a important distinction between will and agency. Will is the process of your mind. Agency is the process of movement. And so if I want to move over here, oh, I'm free to move over there because I'm not in chains. Okay, I have free agency. But if I want freedom of mind, you have to be able to overpower physics to have freedom of mind. So that's the distinction. Will is talking about neuroscience.
So it's more that you have like the capacity to do anything, and if you do things in a divine order, it's beneficial. This is true for atoms, cells, persons, right? Everything seems to work in this function of you can have furthered mobility, furthered free agency. Furthered agency comes from, you know, responsibilities and choices and everything else, and learning and all these other things, adaptations. But as time goes on, you have more freedom, is like evolutionarily true. Like we have more freedom. I'm able to talk to you telepathically right now in ways that many people can, and not everyone could for a long time, right? And so the idea that we're furthering capacity of agency means that we might get to a point where we do have omnipotence and free will, like you're talking about, or become a thing that does in many a millennia.
I don't think even gods can have free will. No, not even gods, not even spirits, because it's so fundamentally contradictory. It just doesn't work, right? But I agree, we can grow an agency, right? Totally. Like, so I think the compatibilists, they should just switch to the term free agency. I'll agree with you all day long. We have free agency, but just will is the wrong word to be using.
Well, I mean, so like, let's say you have a simulation that thinks all possible thoughts, you know, to prepare for a virus or some kind of simulation like that. You're not always thinking the thoughts you want to think, right? You can create a system that thinks all possibilities, even beyond the things that you would normally will to happen. So potentially, yeah, you could think in such free agency that it's beyond what would be rational will, like what you would normally will to happen or think, right?
I'm not sure I captured that point just now.
I mean, if you're thinking every possible thought just quantitatively, then you are defeating the will paradox.
So, okay, so the problem is the will inherently requires a constraint, right? So the freeness, okay, I was like, I'm thinking of every possibility, but now I have to choose. How are you choosing without constraining your options?
Choose which one really is happening, you're saying?
Yeah, God has infinite possibilities. Like, what do you want to do today, God? Oh, I've got a million things I can do.
No, they're all happening at once, though, right? If you had, like, let's say it's you and me, and I have Sim City, you know, the game, and in the game, I set it up that everything happens. Like one day where there's no electricity, one day where there's no water. You know, we just do it all, but we can run them like on a supercomputer, right? Like let's say it's on the cloud servers, and let's say we own the game, and there's millions of people playing it, and they're all doing their cities at once, and basically every potential is happening at once, right? Even things we didn't want to happen.
This is sounding like the many worlds hypothesis.
Well, it's just the idea that more data is higher resolution of agency, and so it removes the issues of will, because you can defeat will by having more things happen, right? I don't know. Anybody? Thoughts? Will? No? I just hear loud fans, and not even mine. Shame.
Sorry, just a sec. I have to work with.
Do you think that, putting aside disagreements about definition even, I was wondering if anyone had strategies of methodological ways that we could re-educate and bring up our population of Earth in general, so that we could actually attain space travel. Based on everything we know, we can't get too far in our universe. Like, we have to actually get to light speed travel. Are we even actually capable of that? How would we become capable of that?
It might just be, you know. Oh, go ahead, Giant. You were gonna say.
So the thing I have a problem with thinking about space travel is I'm one of the people that's like, well, let's fix Earth first before we think about space travel. Why is your mind set on space travel? Why don't we fix the issues we have here first? All right, teach our children.
I think that if people were taught to improve and not be dumbed down so much and not scrabble for scraps, that would fix Earth. And that same improvement in people and letting people be motivated, like the tippy top be motivated, would both fix Earth and get us to space.
I feel like it's
disconnected.
If we spent that, but it is an interesting point. Like, okay, it's kind of like gradual emancipation or something. Like, yeah, you know, like first we'll free women, but then we'll free you, you know, or something like that. First we'll free blacks, then we'll free women, like, which we'll let them vote later. Like, instead of just doing it all at once, like fixing the world right now, we're hoping that trickle down economics from space travel will help us. And there's good reason for that. Like, actually, I'll agree with you on a few points of that. Going to other island like Sir Francis Drake coming back with gold destabilized the currencies of Europe, right? Silver became more valuable than gold, right? So the idea of bringing back resources we didn't expect or anticipate to exist from other places would drastically change the economy. And it seems like Russia is already thinking that way. They're saying, like, if we have more gold and we displace gold and the gold standard will, you know, change everything. So I can see that being a real thing to do, like trickle down, get to the point where we can make the world a better place. But right now we could do so much, you know, like the idea of trying to wait to fix environmental disasters that could really affect everybody because we have, you know, these heterogenic cloud seeding programs like Raphael was showing earlier today, like the chemtrail systems and whatever, in terms of just destruction of environment. Those things are actually real issues. And the left and the right are both pretending them away with different ways of looking like, oh, it's really a carbon tax issue, or, oh, like there's nothing going on at all. I think we need to focus on the world a bit more than using up resources to like hopefully get like a rocket. But I don't know. Hey, Nathan made it. Hello.
Hey,
Nathan.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nathan is a lobster.
Yeah, I've been on that channel for a long time.
There's one thing, I don't think I'm even disagreeing with anyone. Maybe I just didn't make my point clear enough. I always ramble about fiat currency and everything like that. I think that is a fundamental problem in our society. You think about all the things you mentioned, Andreas, how the left and right are snipping at each other and not working on problems, Giant. Like you said, like we could be working on problems now. Totally valid. But they're fed anger at each other. We are fed distractions by a media and educational complex that is fed from this fiat currency. So in terms of what to do, I think going back to a gold standard, which we may be forced into, and I don't think that would be a pleasant process, but we may be forced back into it. As long as that system is manipulated, and this is just a fault of humans probably in human systems, as long as someone is, and they always would, try to push back into a fiat system saying, oh, we need it, I think that we'll always have somewhat of a distraction and somewhat of a pulling away of resources or talent towards cleaning up the environment, towards getting to space, anything that any of us want. As long as this bigger machine is like distracting us and turning us against each other, we got to try to work on our emotions and heal that first. And then we can always, because I think people do agree no matter what, that we would love to clean up the planet and go to space.
Yeah, or at least like prove it exists or something, one way or another.
Yeah.
We're good.
Wait, prove what exists? Was that a bone for the flat earthers or something?
You gotta throw them a bone. Gotta throw the flatties a bone, bro. Yeah.
Okay.
What did I throw for the flat earthers?
No, I did. I was just.
Andreas was like assuming space exists.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's coming from the guy. I'm just saying.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, it's cool. I mean, but wait, there was more because Nathan just joined us and we were trying to talk about free will determinism, but it also probably be worth it to talk about the idea of the issues of how we fix the world. I mean, we're talking about if we had like a universal goal. There's that movie, H.G. Wells movie.
It's up to the 5 of us to fix everything about the world. So we got.
Well, no, it's more of a question of like, would a unify? So in the movie Things to Come, 1936, H.G. Wells, they have this idea of like the world collapses after. It's right. They made it right before World War II, and they're like, let's just say a World War II kind of happens, and then everything collapsed because of a nuclear kind of bomb thing, and then from there, society has to rebuild itself. The Freemasonry of science, the wings of the world, come from Baghdad, and they drop acid all over people, LSD or some kind of gas that makes, instead of killing people, it's like a laughing gas that like frees everybody. But then they're like, we give them a unified vision, right? So people start building a rock. It's like a space cannon to launch people to the moon. And there's a bunch of Luddites that come out and say, why are we doing this? We should just like live on the ground. Why are we? But the idea is that if we give them this dream that they can go to the moon, sure, people will die for it, but people die all the time. But we'll give them something to, worth dying for.
Andreas,
right?
That is why people built the cathedrals.
Andreas,
and I guess the idea with anarcho-capitalism is that let's not centrally plan like a group of people and what they do. We're just going to let them do their own thing, and that'll be the best thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah, just give people a bunch of like, put people in a rat race in a maze, and then hit them with sticks if they go backwards, and then put carrots in front of them, and call it free will, right? Seth, what were you about to say? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that you're just falling into the archetypal trap of constructing a Tower of Babel, the pride of humanity, to dream big, to accomplish great feats of collective effort. How dare you offend God with your high hopes and big dreams, Andreas?
This is exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it could be. That's the thing. A singular vision might be unifying, but like
hashtag sarcasm from me.
Well, a singular vision is great as long as it's voluntarily adopted.
So right, Seth. Yeah. Well, if it's voluntarily adopted, but again, we're talking about what does that mean? Because if everyone is taught that it's a good thing to do, like I was watching this it was an imam from a Muslim mosque who was like doing his sermon, and he was saying that there are kids that get so upset that they can't dress like the other kids at school, that they have to wear these hijabs and these weird Muslim clothing that they call, but then they get free. Like what are they going to wear instead? They're going to dress like a prostitute or a basketball star.
I mean, I don't think Islam is a great example of what you're describing, because Islam is not just enforced by cultural transmission. It's also enforced by coercion,
Well, I mean, I would say everything is, though. MTV, Netflix subscription plans or coercion. Like everything is coercion. It's not fair to say that.
No. I mean,
I don't think Islam is much worse than Netflix. I really don't. Like I'm just.
Netflix subscriptions are not coercion because nobody's beating you with a stick. If you
Fun fact: I have a friend who beat up the kid of the CEO of Netflix when we went to school together in Spring Elementary School. Yeah, long time ago. But here's the deal. I don't think that coercion is the problem. It's that we don't actually have free will if we're spending our entire life being brought up to believe something is true. And so the alternative also is this antithesis. So if you're not dressing like your culture says is the thing that's okay to do, then you end up dressing like that, whatever something else is saying to do. Where is that free will then? Because you're choosing between options. You're still going to the store and buying clothes,
Well, and like there's always the fear that your daughter will get a crazy tattoo or fall in line with like the woke cult or something like that because she's emotionally pressured to. So that's not free will either. But it's a matter, like you were saying earlier, choosing what directs her.
So are you guys saying that coercion is no worse, morally speaking, than trying to influence people through words?
Am I saying it's no worse?
I want to hear Nathan's distinction. It sounded like he was setting up a distinction.
Well, I mean, part of what we should argue, I would say, is that what is good or bad, morally speaking, unless you're, somebody who doesn't believe in moral right and wrong. And I think if we're going to say coercion is not a problem, then you're saying, well, it's not a moral problem if I coerce somebody to do or not do something Well,
the key question is, what is coercion? Because Andreas, he's broadening the scope. And so it sounds like you interpret it narrowly. What is your narrow scope for what you think is coercion?
Coercion is the initiation of force against a peaceful person.
Really?
So brainwashing is not coercion, but
I wouldn't agree on like any level. I think coercion is the definition is persuasion, right? And probably for a reason. Let's say persuasion, compulsive persuasion to control or to restrain. And so that, again, I think to restrain or like government by force comes later by the 19th century.
So
I disagree. I disagree, Andreas. I think that what Nathan is saying is that coercion, even if you use rhetoric, there's always a threat of physical force behind it. Because, say, for instance, that you don't accept the rhetoric from the coercive person, like Nathan says, you would be chucked out of society, which happened a lot. And then you're thrown to the literal wolves. Then that's still physical force.
Yeah, so what's the difference between coercion and manipulation? Because you can be very manipulative to coerce someone. See, the way I'm using the word isn't to force someone. It's like to guarantee an outcome. I can coerce you into doing something without violence, you know?
What is your definition of manipulation?
Manipulation is to realize an outcome that you've chosen for a scenario. And often by manipulating, I mean by changing the environment.
You're saying if I make myself a sandwich and therefore I have a sandwich, that was manipulation?
Force. You've manipulated bread and matter into a sandwich.
Well, I forced bread into becoming, bread and other ingredients into becoming a sandwich, but I haven't coerced a person. I haven't manipulated a person, right? I would assume you would make some distinction between, making a person into.
But you could coerce your wife into making a sandwich without violence.
What is your definition of coercion? Though, I mean, it sounds like you're saying like using speech is coercion.
Yeah, you could use neurolinguistic programming. I think you could think Lucifer, for instance, used coercion to convince Adam and Eve that the forbidden fruit was a good idea, right? It wasn't with violence.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we just have a very different definition of coercion. I mean, because
So I'm willing to play with Nathan's paradigm. Okay, so just accepting your distinctions, like you said something really interesting, which sounds like the kind of one of the foundational principles of your philosophy. So you said, correct me if I'm wrong, you said, if we let people do what they freely want to do, that will create the best outcome. Did I get that okay?
Yeah, because and that's judged by the individual subjective reality. Now, I'm not saying that every individual will get the best outcome that they could possibly get under any possible society, but I'm just saying overall you're going to get the most alignment.
There is evidence
preferences. So
there is evidence to Nathan's point. I would think of the 1960s and the 1660s as examples, right? Like you have a period of absolute freedom, which destroys a lot of lives. People learn from that, and the next generation is afraid of drugs and syphilis. And then you have a very straight lace people choosing, because they have choice, choose then to the straight and narrow. It becomes like the vogue.
Yeah, to a large degree, I sympathize with that principle, because I agree, like free choice, like when you're making a choice, you're choosing what optimizes your well-being. And so if everyone gets to choose what
at least what you believe will optimize your well-being in that moment.
Right. So it's a great heuristic for optimizing societal well-being. Look at
Calvin saying, look at Portland after legalization of all drugs. Yes, but Calvin, look at Portland in 20 or 10 years when the reaction of kids is that they're going to never want to deal. Like the kids these days are so afraid of fentanyl. You're going to see it.
Long-term view.
I honestly think that the kids born after like 2007 or 12, like they're going to be so afraid of drugs and all the stuff that they've seen and their youth is this world that we're living in right now. You have to imagine, like, they're not going to be into it. They're going to be afraid of it, and they're going to stay away.
I don't think Oregon's a great example of what freedom does in terms of drugs, because not only is Oregon legalizing drugs, but they were also subsidizing public use of them, where you can just do drugs in public and like kind of have the externality of making everybody else deal with some of the consequences of your actions. Whereas in a truly free society, you wouldn't be able to just like slum on the street.
Well, no, in a truly free society, you would have to have public spaces. You couldn't just have all kinds of private property. You'd have to have some public.
Yeah, in an anarcho-capitalist true society, you wouldn't have any public spaces at all.
I don't know.
I think that in an anarcho-capitalist, that
we live
you would
in
have lots of nice spaces, though, because people would value that and they would want to bring that back.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I would argue we live
in that, you know, like maybe somebody makes a space like a park that they allow people to visit, but it would still be privately owned.
So the world, like in a practical example, the world we live in right now, like in an anarcho-capitalist series of states without a new world order, unless you're into that, like you've got the maritime the oceans are non-state, right? They're commons in that sense because there's no capacity to fully claim the oceans, and so they're mutually between sovereign states. So you would call that commons.
The oceans are a pretty good example of the tragedy of the commons, if you're familiar with that.
I mean, to an extent. I mean, in terms of practice as well. Like think about Glenn Maxwell's Terra Mars program.
Doesn't tragedy of the commons pretty much apply to any resource?
It applies to any resource that is communal, basically.
Right.
That is finite.
Yeah. Well, that's why the oceans are overfished, you know,
and polluted.
Yeah.
We talk about commons. We talk about our ethics here in this country, that we can have the free speech to speak of these things in the first place. But then Pakistan, India, and China, they're supposed to follow the laws of the UN, but they don't give a shit. And so they're the ones who are overpolluting and overfishing. And so then we're back to, now we need coercion because sometimes people are just assholes.
Yeah, I mean, the anarchist way to solve that would be to actually subdivide the ocean, make it privately owned, and so different groups of people would own different parts of the ocean. And then if somebody aggressed on your private property by dumping garbage into it, you would have a claim to go to the court and, you know, sue them, basically. So
do you think individuals could really like govern and effectively, you know, execute, you know, control over their slice of the ocean?
Hey, corporations are individuals too, bro.
Yeah, corporations are people. I do like that phrase, actually.
Do anarchists, are they chill with corporations?
Sort of. I mean, the current system is a little bit funky in that you have corporations basically in some ways subsidized by governments, you know, like given special privileges. So in an anarchist system, you definitely would have people getting together to form groups of people working on some project or some product or whatever. But, you know, special privileges like patents and government enforced copyright and things like that should probably not exist.
Yeah, the problem with the oceans being divided is that there is, in environments, all environments, the whole world, there is no way, you can't stop flowing from one section to the other and all that stuff. So you're gonna have so much crossover that would never be a feasible solution. What you need is you need to have unity among humanity first, where everybody understands and has the same respect for everything, and not the competition, because the competition is what causes all the issues in the first place. You got to address the issues and not just try to come up with solutions within an issue, right? So the solution would be that everybody has to understand the details of how it affects everyone, and everyone would just have to individually really want to do it. You know, that's where you have to get.
Like, you can imagine a state, if a state has a legitimate source of violence and corporations are incentivized to cooperate to produce more resources, because a state not only has a legitimate source of violence, it's also responsible for refining its resources, right, including people, places, and things. So if a state is going to create a world with more fish, then what it does is it creates, you know, an agency with a corporation that's working with other corporations in other states, and then they produce higher and higher fish result, which is something that benefits the alliance, the trade alliance of these states. Unless you're like, but you're fully against legitimacy of violence. Like, what is it as an anarchist? You're most like, is your priority the removal of state, or what?
Yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't mean that you remove all rules or you remove all systems. Like, there would be lots of systems,
trade agreements,
uniform run. You know, like with the ocean. You know, I don't know exactly how it would turn out, but if you just take violence out of the picture, and if people are homesteading different parts of the ocean, which is probably how the private property aspect would come about, and that's normally how it comes about in other places, the neighboring parts of the ocean ownership, they would have to make agreements with each other as to, okay, you know, I'm not going to pollute your section, I'm not going to pollute my section, which would result in pollution in your section, or if different people own shares in a river, for example, they would have to obviously make agreements with each other as to what that means exactly.
Yeah, so then you got like 10 people that own part of the river, you know, or no, sorry, like one person owns part of the river, and then 1 million people that own part of the river, and that one person can afford to pay the penalty. It's like in San Francisco, there's a rule you can't fly over certain zones at certain times. There's a $10,000 fine. So Jeff Bezos just considers it a parking ticket. You know, he's like, okay, it's gonna be 10 grand if I fly. This is it's a problem that penalties don't always resolve. I mean, even it could be punitive with the purpose of trying to make it like relative to that corporation.
Yeah.
I'm not
I
sure
do
if
think
I
about that
understood
sometimes.
right, yeah.
Sorry? Oh, I think he.
Uh-oh.
That was it. He's like, that's it. He's like, he doesn't want to deal with these imperialists. I get it.
I've been researching agorism, like a light constitutional outline, but a mostly free market anarchical system, like the US was fundamentally when it was first started. I think about that because unfortunately, Nathan might be right that punishments would still be unequally felt compared, like just now, the CEOs and billionaires at BlackRock don't care as much about parking tickets or flying over restricted zones as a private drone operator.
God, the carbon tax auctions in the European Union, where you just like, if you're a corporation, you buy other companies' carbon taxes, and if you're a human or a small like business painter, you can't like drive your car because it's illegal to carbon all over people.
Yeah.
So are you talking about a scenario like with the river where like a rich person would do something really bad to the river, or
yeah, sure, yeah, like let's say it's Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Let's say that person's Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that river's the Amazon.
Yeah.
Let's just
okay.
say this is a
river,
hypothetical, right? You know,
and then the river is owned by a group of people, like a corporation, basically, or is it?
Well, I mean, you've got again, this is what's really going on, right? You've got tribes along the Amazon that all have lived there forever. They have like claim to a place.
They've definitely homesteaded a lot of the river.
Yeah. And there's thousands of different governments that have come and gone literally in the last 100 years, let alone 1,000. So the states aren't really relevant. Brasilia is now claimed, Brasilia is a state of the Amazon that has a freeway running through the Amazon now, right?
Right.
And so like and corporations are coming in. Coca-Cola moves in with OXO. OXO is like a petroleum Coca-Cola bottling thing. And then they're dumping plastics into the Amazon. Which there's also worse issues, which are fishermen from Japan have purchased, because in Peru, the Japanese run the government essentially through the Yakuza, right? So the Fujimorismo government down there, and they've set it up that they have dudes that just blow up and put poison in parts of the Amazon so they can swoop up lots of fish, and then they sell those fish, and then people die because it's like poisoned, essentially.
Yeah, I think the anarchist idea with something like that is just like if Coca-Cola set up a plant and started dumping pollution into the river, then the owners of the river or different parts of the river would be able to sue the Coca-Cola and collect damages that would.
But like, how does that work in real life? Because you've got courts right now that, I mean, this is an international corporation, outsources its company to the other side of the world. This river, what are they going to do? Get a lawyer who speaks Quechua and Spanish and English? It's a lot,
Yeah, I mean, you have to. you basically have arbitration. So like they're in typically people imagine the framework as in like if you don't have a prior agreement and somebody aggresses against you, then you have the right to use force. So like if like Coca-Cola came and aggressed against the tribes by damaging the property, then the tribe would have standing really to just go and destroy the plant, But hopefully they could instead come to an agreement, come to a contract about how they would arbitrate disagreements. And then if there was a problem, like let's say that the Coca-Cola plant went in, they knew that they didn't want the plant to get immediately destroyed by the natives there. And so they make a deal with the natives saying, we will not pollute the river. And if we do pollute the river, then we will owe you gobs of money. And then let's say they do end up polluting the river, then they would go to the arbitration court that had been previously agreed upon in the contract. And then the arbitrator would say, Coca-Cola, you must pay this money. And by the way, part of the contract was that they also agreed to have their money taken by the bank, and the bank has an agreement with the arbitration system.
I feel like that system requires several more steps. First, it requires there to have already been some sort of infrastructure, state order that has emerged that you can rely on, because otherwise you're talking about because this is a real example. I was kidding about it being hypothetical, obviously, this has actually happened. And in South America, you had Banana Republic corporations, anarcho-capitalists, paid Panama, my God, what was Noriega? And half of Brazil was just corporations moving in that were built in the South, right? So there's no oversight. And then this idea that you're going to have a tribunal, who are you going to pick? You have to build it unless it already exists. And again, the idea is that if that happens, I'm not going to do my business in Philadelphia. I'm going to move it to Peru, right? Or if that's happening in Peru, then I'll move it to the middle of Africa, like the United Arab Emirates are doing now.
I have a question. Anarchy, doesn't that make it non-anarchical?
Yeah, it sounds like bureaucracy.
Corporation that's so large, that's an arc, right? Because the arc is building something up under a body of people to make any kind of corporation. I would think a genuine anarchical society of any sort, whatever you add on to it, that's the main thing, is you can't have any kind of arc. You can't have any kind of way that people can take so much power over resources or area or anything like that. You'd want to distribute it so there's no arc, so there's your balance. So it kind of defies.
That's ANCOM versus ANCAP. But
yeah, I was about to say that's probably the distinction there. So ANCOMs are more about having communal property. They don't accept the idea of having private property, like an anarcho-capitalist would. So anarcho-capitalism is all about, we want to build the capital base of the entire world. We want more factories. We want, more production. We want people to have more happiness and more stuff that they want. But they have to do that while respecting the property rights and the sovereignty of everybody else as well,
Essentially, anarcho-capitalism is the world we live in today, I would argue. I mean, granted, underneath in an international political science system, the way international political scientists look at the world is because states they don't have a higher state above them unless they're client states. And so states are in an anarcho-capitalist situation. However, underneath those states, because states and corporations are persons, they have feudal systems, essentially, which include us, right? We are, it's not quite the sovereign citizen plea that we're all property, but it's close,
So I definitely agree that we have a lot of aspects of anarchy right now. I mean, if I have a dispute with a merchant, it's usually arbitrated by the credit card company or eBay or Amazon or something like that.
Most cities are really corporations. Corporation of London, the Corporation of Apple, right? Yeah.
So I want to go back to
the taxes and the
penalties. I want to go back to the coercion point, because I think this is really essential. Nathan, you were talking about how we're trying to avoid a system of coercion, but to me it sounds like you're describing an increase in coercion. It's like once Coca-Cola moves into the Amazon, it's like, oh, there's a differential power dynamic. Who has more power to levy arbitration? You're forcing you're coercing these tribal natives to engage in your arbitration. And if they don't engage with it, oh, if they try to like blow up your plant, you're going to say, oh, you're trespassing on my property. So now Coca-Cola declares war on the natives. You're just, it's just power dynamic coercion.
Are these dudes that pick up chicks manipulating or coercing? You know what I mean?
for libertarian, it's a really important distinction to see who aggressed first. You know, so like if I'm just sitting in my house and a robber came into my house, or just anybody came into my house uninvited and won't leave, then I have the right to use quote unquote force to move them out of my house.
Yeah, but like, you see, again, you've got principles that you've decided through, like, you've decided that this is your house because you have principles that say it's your house. That person doesn't agree with your principles, right?
And they're dangerous. If they're going to move it, they're dangerous.
So you're talking about where there's a dispute about who owns a piece of property.
Sure, let's say it's the Palestinian land and it's like the Israeli, pioneer settlers. Like, this is our land. God has given it to us. We must build our homes here. It's for our families. And the Palestinians are like, we disagree.
Yeah. So, I mean, it has to be like viewed on a case by case basis. You know, like if I was the first one to, like homestead a piece of property and I fenced it in and I built a house there. You know, I mixed my labor with the resources available to me. I didn't aggress against anybody else to get those resources. I engaged in free trade with other people to, buy materials and things like that. Then clearly I should be the owner because I'm the one that mixed my labor. I was the one that used my quote unquote free will, whether it's deterministic or not, to do those things. So,
are you talking about the indigenous people that are exiled out, or are you talking about the squatters that have rights because they've been there for 5 centuries? I mean, it's hard to say.
I agree that there's different theories for private property, but I think there's valid arguments to be made.
But then again, like, who are you going to and in that example again, it's not a hypothetical. Who do you have to arbitrate? Do you pick the Egyptian court or do you pick the New York court? Or like,
well, it kind of at the base level is the idea that you have the right to self-defense and defend your property, but it's not ideal to have to come to blows to resolve disputes. And so those kind of things like arbitration and a private court system would naturally evolve from your desire not to.
One last thought that I want to say before we go, Seth. Wait, before you go to coercion, the other thought is just that then the problem with arbitration is it all comes down to economics, right? Because then you're saying it's all about who has the most value to the rest of the world, which is weird in an anarchist system, because then then we're talking again about like the common good.
Well, generally speaking, in an arbitration, sorry, go ahead, Seth, before I answer that part.
Yeah, it's fine. The problem, exactly what he says, in our current court system, there's already suspicion about who's buying the court. Whoever has the most money, they can buy the allegiance of the court. He sided with Coca-Cola. Yeah, because Coca-Cola bought him out. Nobody trusts the court system when there's bias involved. And under anarcho-capitalism, you're maximizing distrust in arbitration.
No, I would trust arbitration if it was all about that, but I would know it wasn't about justice. It would be about the bottom dollar line, right?
Well,
that's not what we're looking for in arbitration. We're not looking for the powerful, the rich win.
Well, we might be, because I'm not against that. I'm not saying that's the worst thing that could. Some people think that's the worst thing that could happen. I think sometimes I like OJ getting off. All right.
There might be a little bit of a misinterpretation of what Nathan could be arguing on a societal level, because let's say a more ideal situation happens and like all of America, when it was first conceptualized, it had a lot of problems, but at least it had a common culture. What if you wouldn't be aggressing against just one neighbor and just one homestead, but just like the Palestinians, it would be a whole community. And then you could get the world, and the world would have more of an ethos, a united ethos. We could work towards that of saying like, this isn't our culture. These aren't our neighbors, but this main point that we have about the rights of the individual, the rights of non-aggression, the rights of not trashing other people's stuff is being violated in this situation. Maybe that kind of soft moralizing power of a cohesive anarchical culture could be a buff for the immediate need of coercion and violence?
Well, yeah, there's a big thing is that, yeah, to your point, Tiffany, that a big disincentive to engage in bad behavior in a free society is that your reputation will be destroyed and nobody will want to associate with you. Nobody will want to do business with you. And you'll be kind of effectively kind of cut off from trade. And then you'll become very poor compared to what you would have been had you not engaged in those bad behaviors. Yeah. So, and going back to the point about the arbitration, usually when you make a contract that is going to be arbitrated by a court, you come to an agreement about who or what corporation is going to arbitrate. And, you know, since you're entering into that contract of your own free will, you know, you have the ability to say, I'm not going to agree to this contract unless it's a reasonably neutral judge who is not just going to rule against me. You know, that, you know, I think that, you know, that they're going to be use their expertise to come to a just conclusion. And there's also the element of competition, because there will be judges or arbitration courts that are competing with each other for business. And so if they don't do a good job, nobody's going to want to put their name on the contract.
As much as that sounds like hard to understand, like, or believe, like what he's saying is completely believable. This is what Bitcoin and smart contracts or all of these things are trying to do, is automate the process to make it easier. And, you know, if you imagine every Bitcoin contract, smart contract, is replacing not just a dollar, it's also replacing a paralegal, an hour of lawyer time, you know, a contract being written, all sorts of things that are going into what makes what a contract is, which is a voluntary agreement between two mutually benefited parties, right?
But isn't there a problem with the concentration of power no matter what? In any kind of these systems that you guys are talking about, no matter what, when you get concentration of power, those people want to stay in power always, and they're going to use whatever tools they have at hand to increase that power and make sure that they keep anybody else from getting.
You mean like the Zillow.com of judges? Yes. Yeah, that would happen. I agree.
It's gonna eventually happen no matter what in any system. That's what's happening to America right now. Is it just slowly getting taken over by more and more of the same people just putting their people in place? And that's what you're always going to get. You're going to get mafia rules. You're going to get an art. So true anarchy,
which, to be fair, would be better than this.
You can't ever add anything to it. You have to make sure there's zero arcs. If there's not zero arcs, those people are always going to build that arc to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're going to dominate. And you're going to have to rely on people that are willing to be just as strong and just as dominant to face that. You guys can't structure things to make your argument work. In the end, no matter what, they don't care what you say. You know what I mean? You can try to structure it over and over again, but a true anarchy is never going to allow any kind of arc to ever. You have to do it in the beginning. You can't have any arcs at all. Once you have the arc, it's over. It's gonna demolish everybody.
In the next generation, people are like, I didn't make this deal, my dad did.
Basically, you're going to have to reinvent the state to solve all the problems that anarchy creates, right? So to Tiffany's point, I think this unifying culture idea, it doesn't work with anarchism, because anarchism is anti this coercing people into a unified culture. Like, once you have anarchism, you're just letting all these different cultures evolve and see which ones work. And to the reputation thing, I don't think that solves the problem, because, you know, the phrase like, who writes history? It's the victors. The same thing with reputation. Who writes the reputation? The people who have the money to publicize, I'm the good guy, the natives are the bad guys, right? The natives, these guys, they bombed our plant. We're just trying to satisfy our customers. How dare they blow up our plant, right?
Right, it's like the Old Testament. Hey, you want to know who really built the pyramids? Exactly.
And the whole idea,
I don't think
one last point, sorry.
Go ahead.
The idea of rejecting arbitration, right? You're like, oh, just if it's biased arbitration, we can just reject it. Well, that puts you back into the coercive layer. It was like, okay, the natives don't want to arbitrate with Coca-Cola. Okay, we're going to send in our Coca-Cola militia to go.
Yeah, guess who has bigger guns?
You out. Exactly. So it just goes back to coercion.
I don't. Yeah, it depends on the situation. I mean, obviously, if
I don't think so. I think absolute violence always wins, regardless of the situation.
I wouldn't agree with that, because, like, I think there's lots of cases where actors gain a bad reputation for engaging in violent behavior.
Coca-Cola can change their name. right? Like
when one of the pioneers for getting rid of the slave trade was the UK, and a lot of it started from people deciding they were going to not buy sugar that was produced by slaves, and so that disincentivized it, and then after a while, I think the British decided they weren't going to protect the slave trade ships. Like they came up with a way to, there was some sort of technicality, I don't remember what, but
you might be sabotaging yourself with the slavery argument, because it took the power of a state to stop slavery. Anarchy didn't do it.
I didn't really stop
at least from my opinion, the slavery goes away when the state stops enforcing slavery. Like
I don't think so. I mean, go to Africa today, and you can see people being sold. And you go to Long Beach at night, you can see people being sold. And children are being sold all the time. And states, corporations, no one's stopping that. The elite continue to buy people, right?
Really quick though, people never give the religion as much credit as it really deserves, but it was the Christian ethos in England, which America should have led, but they didn't. But it was the Christian ethos in England specifically that caused England to come to denounce slavery and not publicly support it anymore. Simply, I want to point out that that's one of the arguments that I made of the kind of moral ethos having a soft push towards making great reforms.
I have a black pill.
One country and
I have a black pill on slavery, like pretty hard, but I get the feeling that, if you look at what slavery is and what it was, it's kind of this very changed thing. At one point in Moorish law, if you study like the ancient understanding of how servants were treated by lords and vice versa, lords had certain requirements and obligations that they had to uphold and take care of their servants as well as their servants' children. And so it was kind of like social security in a lot of ways, because it wasn't the state that did it. The state just required the masters to have obligations if they had servants. But then you get to a point where we're saying, hey, if we can avoid having these obligations, then we can also make sure everyone is taxed and owned by essentially the state. And we have social security systems. And this is what value would a monarchy have for other people owning people than themselves? The whole point of England is that everyone is owned by the queen or king now, and they don't want other people to get involved with that business. They have a monopoly on owning people. So I don't know.
The slave owners are competing with the state. How dare
right.
you?
Yeah. It just doesn't benefit them.
Yeah. So the anarchist view on, or like that's actually a common argument against anarchism, is that eventually a state would take over anyway. It would just have it would be like the French Revolution, where it was it was chaos, and then you got Napoleon, who was authoritarian and all that, and that was bad. And but the argument is, if the worst thing that could happen is a new state that's coercive comes to take its place, then that's not really an argument against anarchism. It's just another argument against having a bad state, So,
well, I mean, then it says that the anarchism. I mean, it is though, because it's saying that anarchism will then just lead to a worse state, because now you have a state that's even more restrictive of personal sovereignty. Because now you've got like a mafia running Vegas, where people end up buried in the desert instead of, granted, don't get me wrong. Like, we agree on a lot. I hate Locke. I think Lockean values are adorable and pathetic, but at the same time, they're probably better than like the absolute Mad Max chaos that can emerge if you don't have some sort. I mean, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but
yeah, I mean, we can talk about the monopoly case. I think is important, because a lot of people make the argument that unless the government were there to break up a monopoly, and in this case we're talking about a monopoly of force, then there will be a natural monopoly that will form. Like people use the example of telecoms and railroads and such. But if you actually go back and study, those cases, the only monopolies that endure for a long period of time are those that are enforced with coercion
by the state, right?
Yeah, and so if you can take that away, I don't think there will really be a permanent monopoly on the use of force or arbitration or courts or security services or those sort of things, because the landscape will be constantly evolving I mean, we got sort of a monopoly for Microsoft Windows for a while, but then it got replaced by Linux in the form of Android, and then also the iOS, and so there's like temporary, maybe natural monopolies, but they don't seem to last long if they're not enforced by the state.
Why wouldn't you just put a restriction or a roof on anybody's ability to own over a certain amount? It's a real simple thing. Why would you give anybody willy-nilly ability to just extremely take over resources? That's the problem.
I actually think that would happen naturally, Giant. I think that would happen naturally because I think in true anarchism, one thing that would happen. What?
You would have to force that idea and make sure that there is no way that anybody can have any more. It says it in the Bible. It's something that we can all argue real easy in the law. You can't own anything more than what you can govern, what you can put your own hands on and deal with yourself. If you're owning anything beyond that, that should be illegal. It should be unlawful to do that.
That's a good point. And I don't think I was disagreeing with you. I was saying that under true anarchy, I don't think that patent law would be a thing. And so it would move so fast, and monopolies probably maybe couldn't exist. And that would be it might actually be a little bit of a detriment to creativity. But so I'm not sure about the strategy around that either, but I don't think patent law would be a thing in true anarchy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think Microsoft, in a system where there's no government enforcement of copyright or patent, I don't think Microsoft would have been able to.
I mean,
why not?
I would just say real quickly on that, though, that Microsoft and a lot of these companies, they existed in a world where there wasn't a lot of. So, for instance, Microsoft emerged when software was traded amongst friends, and they made those laws. And those laws only existed in Europe and the United States in order. And it didn't work at first. It actually took a lot of effort with the Japan-Soviet alliance, with the Trilateral Commission, in order to make these kinds of agreements. So it took until the 90s, and by that point, Microsoft was well established. And the way they did it, and this is the way corporations work now, because we are living again, I think, in an ANCAP society, is the best marketing strategy that I've seen, apparently, is drug dealers. So what you do is you give someone a product for free until you saturate the market and get rid of everyone else. And now you exploit and control, monopolize the market because these people are addicted to the product. Uber, is a great example of that. But Amazon, Google, any number of corporations, they're essentially drug dealers because they know that if you saturate the market first, then people will give up on that market for a while, and they'll get so far ahead, they're thinking that in 5 years they can do their next business, right?
This doesn't apply to software, but well, go ahead. Sorry.
Your camera's off. Sorry, it was disorienting.
My camera's off?
Nathan's camera's off, yeah. I was going to say that I think that the patent thing, what stops, let's say Microsoft, what stops Microsoft from saying, oh, under anarchy, we want to build a patent authority. Just like we're building arbitration organizations, we're going to build a patent organization, and then we're going to give them money, and then they're going to be like, oh, guess what? They're going to go inspect
Microsoft
everyone.
owns GitHub. They did what you're talking about.
So this whole patent authority, it could be you just pay money, and the patent authorities, they go find the patent bad guys. They go hire these, mercenaries to just go blow up anyone who's violating Microsoft's patent. So that goes back to coercion, right?
Well, yeah, that wouldn't be libertarian principles in action there. It would be something else.
Well, it would be the corporation, building an organization and no one's stopping it from doing what it wants to do. Because the state is supposed to bind bad actors, right? If
are you
Microsoft
familiar?
Well, so that would be in violation of their agreements with all of their partners, and so then they would be taken to court, and if they didn't pay up for the damages that they caused, then they wouldn't be able to do business anymore.
You mean Johnson & Johnson with a Texas two-step where you say you're bankrupt because you transfer all your money into another corporation? This is Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is a genius and a handsome man, passed away, but he worked for the elite. I think he was under he survived Hitler and Stalin, and was part of the Trilateral Commission, part of the Illuminati kind of guy. His quote from the Technotronic Age, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Age, which this book predicts everything about 50 years ago. The Technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date, complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. This is like 1969, 1970. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by authorities, right? So the idea of total information control, so you know exactly what everyone's doing, everyone could do, you can able to predict their movements, and then you can say, all right, well, the probability of this entire town acting up, we can make sure that gas prices are too high for them to even move around. Like, this is what they're doing, right? This is how it works. We can select certain kinds of ads for you to like guide you forward. So again, with this whole free will thing, like now they're able to actually control, because they've taken you out of nature, they can control your entire environment and dictate what you, because you're getting hormonal reception. These are people that have learned from casino machines and addiction. They've made Facebook so perfect that you'll get a pleasure response if you do what they want you to, and a suffering pain response if you don't, right? So, I mean, where do we go?
But you would agree that not everybody is like total victims of those sort of things. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of people that are addicted to various stuff, but there's a lot of people who aren't. And, you know, maybe they belong to
a specific example, but Facebook Meta owns, like, so for instance, my dad never used Facebook in his life, but Meta purchases companies that are personal private security firms that buy all of the offline data of everybody so that they have data on everybody. So they have like a brown footprint. And so they know, like, for instance, all of the, I'm sure, Hollywood video rentals my dad he never had an account, right? So like you exist in a world, right?
A little creepy.
Like, so are you saying that in a free society that would be worse somehow, or?
Well, I feel like a free society, I mean, this is almost back to Seth's point, that at that point, because of information, free society is impossible, because what you have in an anarchy is you have the potential for freedom to allow someone to become so aware of what other people are doing that it makes it possible for them to manipulate and coerce in any way, and other people won't have, because the future is not equally distributed. Like, a lot of people don't have access to all of these things at once, like you said. So those people are far easier to control because they have less data. This
reminds me of like the 3-body problem, like, because the aliens are like over Earth and they have like they have total knowledge of everybody's conversations and all their computers and whatnot, and so they exercise a tremendous amount of influence and everything just from that information.
Wouldn't a free society not have actors that have the ability to psychologically manipulate the other ones for profit, right? So that's kind of my point, is that why wouldn't you just structure the society so that no one can ever get to the point where they can manipulate? They wouldn't want to. There would be no incentive, right? If they can't have more than a house, everybody can check on that. You can't have more than one house. Let's say you can't have more than a certain amount of acreage, and you can't have more than one business. It'll make you functional, but you're going to have to farm your own land. You're going to have to put some sweat, blood, and tears into what you're doing and not use other people. And everybody else is afforded that same ability. And you can go a little bit smaller than that. There's going to be a floor and a ceiling, just like we build buildings, just like we build rooms. Right? You use structures.
Then you have sink or swim. Then you have like 1,000 giants that emerge, and then everyone else dies because not everyone can build their house as good as you. I've seen his house, by the way. It's amazing.
But the thing is that everybody's able to do all these things. This is provable because we've done it for many thousands of years. Humans have been able to run their own piece of property and maybe one business. Right? You can't ask for more than that. Why would you be able? Give me a reason.
Yeah, Seth looks like he's got a reason.
I can't argue back. Yeah, give me a reason why you should be able to capitalize on more resources than what you can manage. When it says that you can't.
You're probably thinking of somebody like Elon Musk that has like 5 companies and.
Yeah, like a wealth cap.
Elon Musk is not that intelligent. He's not that much more intelligent than other humans here to be able to capitalize on that much of the resources.
So my question is,
able to do that.
my question with that is, what is a moral solution to the problem of Elon Musk? Is it to go and take all of his companies but one and give them...
He doesn't even really have any ownership at all. The thing is none of us really have ownership. What we're doing is, for the time period that we can maintain something, we're given the ability to manage those resources. That's all it really is. That's all your mortgages. That's all the contracts are. As soon as you start violating things, you can't pay bills, you commit a crime, any of those things, it's gone, right? So you don't really have that ownership in the first place, whether you think you do or not. All you have to do is just structure it a little more contained, that people can't go outside that containment with how many resources they can manage. Why do you trust in those people that they are able to manage your resources or other people's resources? Are these people completely retarded and these people are just so genius that they should just be able to take all their resources? That's where I don't understand where an argument would...
Let me give you a thought experiment, because I just want to understand where you're coming from. So let's say you lived in a... First, tell me if this matches what you're talking about. Let's say you live in a town and there's somebody fairly wealthy in the town who owns more than one company and more than one house. Would you, like, are you saying that you would go up and take one of his houses from him using coercion?
You don't need to do that. All you have to do is implement a rule, and you depending on the situation, like you're saying, how would I manifest? How would we manifest this? How would we start this, right?
You can only really be in one at once. So as long as he's in another,
start something new.
So
right?
you're saying some people would squat in the second home that he's not currently occupying? Is that what you're saying?
No, you don't have to do that. See, the point is that I'm telling you the ideal of how you would structure it. But you're saying, well, how do we unravel what is going on now and get into the new thing?
Well, right? Well, the new thing sounds like a system where that rule would have to be enforced somehow. So I'm asking basically how would that rule be enforced?
Exactly. You would want it ideally to be enforced. And yes, if it was necessary and you have enough people, then what is the guy going to do, right, at a certain point?
So you're
right?
saying
in terms of enforcement,
people in the town. Sorry, go ahead, Tiffany.
I'm sorry. All I was going to say, to both your guys' point, you don't actually have to disagree. In terms of enforcement, it doesn't even have to be a big centralized authority like a military. We could revert to just local elected sheriffs only, which is something that people are kind of talking about that we should have in this country. So maybe something like a sheriff's department could handle that.
So what you guys are saying
to do it.
So like the people in the town would elect the sheriff, and they would tell the sheriff to go take that guy's house because he has too many houses.
No, because the thing is that the sheriff itself is just a security force, just like the police are. They're policy officers. They're a security force. We can create our own security force. We can create our own police if we wanted to. But what it is it's a power grab that manipulates what it is and says, okay, we're going to elect the police force, but over time, those people have no communication with that police force. You can all be security for yourself. Me individually, I have the right to bear arms. I have the right to protect my property. I have all this stuff. If you got enough people agreeing within your community that that's the rule set, you see, I'm not trying to say that you're going to force this on people. What I'm saying is this is ideal. This is what we should do. And how you go about that should be always contributed by all members of the community to say that, yeah, we think that this is of value. If we did it equally, everything would go smoother and stuff like that, and they would all be in on it. What is that person going to do if we say we're giving your house away? If everybody else in the community said you don't get the second house, sorry, what do you do?
I mean, you're bringing up kind of the general problem with, like, morally speaking, of democracy, which is just because a group of people agree with each other to do something doesn't necessarily make that whatever it is that they want to do morally correct. You know, it's kind of like,
what do you mean by that I'm morally correct, though?
Well, like, for example, like Hitler was originally democratically elected by some process in Germany, and you could say, well, even though the Jews voted against the Nazis, probably majority of them probably voted against the Nazis because they were anti-Jew, but you know, like,
surprised.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them did. I mean, the group of people is not not just one person, but anyway, like, just because, and let's say for the sake of argument that a majority of Germans did vote to exterminate the Jews, that doesn't make it
right. Like you think of
right.
Kurds in Turkey, right? The Turks are saying that the Kurds are the minority, like they voted to displace them. It's majority rules. You could say a prison is a democracy, and I agree with this. That let's say you're a guard in a prison, and we said, hey, the prisoners all voted whether or not to rape this guy, and it was 100 to 1. Would you believe it? So we need you to enforce it, and I think we have to understand democracy from that perspective.
So I've got a lot to say. So I gotta jump in here. You guys have said way too much. I have to catch up with all these points. So first of all, like it seems like we're coming to like this tension between this idea of like, is coercion fundamentally necessary? And it seems like there's this duality between like good coercion and bad coercion. Right?
Manipulation's definitely ideal.
What about incentive?
The state has to coerce the bad guy to stop doing the bad stuff. And if he doesn't, then the bad guy is going to do the bad coercion to like bully the good guys.
What about disincentivizing though? Disincentivizing isn't coercion.
I don't think it's strong enough force to be effective. I think we evolved.
You can't do anything if you're disincentivized. If you're completely disincentivized, there's nothing that you can do about it. How are you going to force
how do you stop disincentivization of coercion? How do you stop the guy with 1 billion houses from coercing everyone to operate in his favor?
Because you give them a better incentive. They get more from your circumstance than they do from that. That works across the board with anything. They're going to go with the better product.
How do you control the incentives? You can only control the incentives with coercion. And so
by having a great plan, a great idea, and that's what people are doing. They're creating plans and ideas, and they're selling those plans and ideas. That's how they first started. But what you're allowing after that is a snowball effect. I'm saying stop the snowball effect. Sell ideas that help everybody rather than putting people in position to have control over the resources.
Well,
I agree that pursuing a strategy of changing the incentive landscape before coercion is an honorable and virtuous first step. I just think it's idealistic to think that you're never going to have to resort to coercion. And the other thing is that society is way too complex for this whole wealth cap thing. Like that idea might have worked back in the hunter-gatherer age. We evolved complex societies for reasons, and we have states for reasons, and we have corporations for reasons, and we have CEOs for reasons. Like people actually pay millions of dollars for a CEO for a reason. Right?
There's bad incentives that have made that where that's what you need, but you can structure it in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
We can make another show on all the ways you can structure corporations and all that stuff and how you can.
The reason that things are structured this way is because this is naturally the way that people found the most benefit. And I mean that from like the worst perspective, it's evil, but people found that this was the cheapest way up front to get a product. People found this was the best way to quickly make.
Well, what's the argument for that? Why is it that why do you think that weren't incentivized by a control structure?
It's just really hard to imagine how you could the way I see it is like neural programming is the only answer. As we started at the beginning with this, I said you can coerce your wife into manipulating bread into a sandwich. You need to be able to coerce without violence in the sense that you need people to be able to choose what you want them to choose. If you're thinking this is like you're a newarchy, right? This is the Platonic newarchy idea. Like Aristotelian lords of wisdom have developed a system that's the government that governs best governs least. The Taoist emperor that is the most wise and the best emperor who runs the emperor the best, no one knows is the emperor, right? So to build a system where people are incentivized and disincentivized, you literally need to build it into language so that when they're communicating, the way they're thinking about things. And we've seen this is something anthropologically. You go to some places, they don't have words for private property, or in Tagalog, they don't have words for gender, or there's just so many things that would have been really convenient for memes in our culture. If we, we're like, oh, we're fighting against it. When the gender pronoun thing happened. Latin America was so interesting because like it's so hard to be, you know, because feminista, feministo, feministamos, like it's impossible not to acknowledge in the grammar. It's like replacing it with X's, right? So we can do stuff with language till we get to a point where people are thinking, okay, this is like the collect. If we just called it the collective or something like that as a baby to everyone, then they're going to see it differently than you're saying like, this land is your land, this land is my land. I mean, honestly, these are completely different ways.
I think what my point is that if you're structuring a company where you have one person that is the managing officer, the CEO or whatever it is, right? CFO, that guy is getting all the resources from the project. Why would it have to be? Why is it any better like that than it would be if you spread the resources across many people and they can only gain so much resources and make so much, and other people can structure that same tool, sell that same object, and have their own company.
Okay, I got to jump back into here. It was too much. So first of all, in economics, there's this concept of economies of scale. So the more you invest into doing one thing, it creates specialization. And when you create specialization, you get better, you know, you're creating better product at a cheaper price. You're making society a better place with specialization. So this this whole idea of everyone being a farmer, that's the opposite of what you want to do. China tried that, their society collapsed. Like, I'm not a good farmer. I would be a horrible farmer. I want the expert in farming to make my food, and I want to do what I'm an expert in, and I want you to do what you're an expert in, and we need to balance out the incentives to make society better.
My point. Yeah, that wasn't my point. The point is that you can, whatever you want to do, whatever your area, your niche, where your 3 acres or whatever it may be that we each individually can reasonably manage, you can take whatever resources off that and build them into whatever. But you can do that in so many different structures. It doesn't take one company doing that. They can all specialize and work together and give each other information.
I do also hear Giant's point. I hear Seth's point, because imagine if you're Woody Allen and someone says, "Congratulations, we're going to take you out of your 1,800-foot apartment and we're going to give you 3 acres of land." You'd be like, "I don't want this." You know, there's it's to be fair to humanity. I think the issue though is with corporations. Corporate social responsibility is only important if you have more than a 5-year plan. Most corporations are born and die every day, just like any other people. And so corporations will come up and be like, "All right, we're going to like saturate the Southeast Asian market with sub-$100 cell phones. Let's go, guys, let's go." And then they're out of the market within 5 years. Whereas, BIC is like, we're going to make corporate social responsibility part of our ethos. So when you look at a recyclable pencil or a disposable razor or something like that, and it says BIC, it was like paid in Portugal a living wage, and that the thing is made out of BPE-free plastic. These kinds of things are only useful if you're going to stay around.
I got another important thing to append to what I was saying. So back to like the whole individuals can specialize. When individuals specialize, they, maximize productivity for society. The same thing applies to resources. This is the fundamental issue. So when people are collectively investing in a resource, all of these people have money and they have to say, what type of a project do I want to invest in? They're using their collective intelligence to say, we all want to focus on investing in social specialization in AI, or we want to collectively specialize in neuroscience, or collectively specialize in farming. When you say you have to wealth cap everything, you're disemboweling our collective intelligence. You're not allowing us to invest properly.
Can I try to address the question about the CEO?
The problem is that you can use any kind of connections and community organization that you want within your area. You can structure all these different things that you guys think are just going to disappear. You can structure them in all different types of ways. You're limiting yourself in the way that you're thinking about it. I'm not saying you have to be a farmer. I'm just saying if you had your own piece of acreage,
agency over where you are,
you can make all your community for miles and miles and miles, link all their resources together, and you can work it all together, and we can trade information with each other. You're limiting the way that you're thinking about it and saying, "Oh, it can't exist that way," but that's not true. It can exist in many different ways.
I hear you Giant point, because you think about it. A lot of people
trying to address the CEO thing.
Yeah, definitely. But let me just really quick
Just from an
say,
economics
I just
standpoint.
want to say the difference though, like between top down and bottom up is big. What he's saying, I think, is huge because when we're thinking of it from everything has to be done by these top down groups as opposed to bottom up a change. Oh, we lost him. Come back. That's what I get for ranting. I'm so sorry. Hold on a second. I'll just play this for a second.
I do wonder how many of these theoretical problems that we are dealing with are grounded or would be solved by no fiat. Please go ahead, Nathan.
Oh yeah, so I just wanted to explain why the CEO ends up getting.
You're so beautiful. I just wanted to give you a solo.
Okay. Like the economics of why a CEO gets paid a lot is solely due to the decisions of the shareholder. So the shareholder, or the group of shareholders, they own the profits of the company. So the company only makes a profit if they produce more value than they consume. That's what a profit is. And that's good if they earn a profit because that means that they are being an efficient use of resources in the economy. And the more profit there is, the more wealth creation in general society is. Well, so in order for the shareholders to maximize a profit that is going to be returned to the shareholders in the form of dividends or just increased value in their shares, they will want to choose a CEO who is best equipped to lead the company and do that. Now, there's a limited set of people who might have the skills in a particular industry to be able to do that. So it's a supply and demand thing. So at a certain point, if they pay too much for the CEO would consume all the profits. So obviously they're not going to pay the CEO all of the profits of the company. They're going to want to balance their desire to make a profit with their desire to hire a competent CEO. And so that the balance that they end up striking is, in the view of the shareholders, the best optimal point where they can maximize their own profit that they get to earn as owners of the company. So it's not because it's just a natural.
It comes a catch-22 though. This is the thing, is that you're talking about within that system. I'm talking about without that system. So if you are limited on what it is that you can get, you already cover all your expenses and everything you need with less need to take from those resources. You see what I'm saying? So you don't need to structure it like that. You wouldn't structure any of the companies in this scenario that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I feel like the CEO, for instance, is something that can be automated, just like paralegals.
No one would want it. Yeah, it would all go away. All that stuff would go away.
This is why AI right now. This is why AI now is being the issues with AI only started when CEOs realized they could be replaced. A few years ago, everyone loved AI. They're like, oh, the idea would be great if we can replace all these workers at McDonald's. But now all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a second. They're going to turn CEOs into flight apps, like cheaptickets.com is going to run your company. It's going to, so then they're freaking out because
I don't buy that.
Maybe somebody that'll happen. I actually happen to be a CEO of a startup. This is like a 10-person startup, and then we're working in AI, and I'm quite familiar with deep learning and the architecture they use for LLMs and everything. And the LLMs are amazing, but they're not to the point where they can replace me, I think. I mean, good luck. Start a competing company.
We're working on it every day. Every day.
They can't really replace Nathan or any CEO. They can't even replace hand workers yet. I know they're working on the robots, but people are always going to want people with hands to do stuff. They're not like fast food workers are some of the last things they replace.
I want to get a cigar rolled by a Cuban child for sure over a robot. I know it's worth more money. I get it.
But I think that's the point, is that they can get rid of the people that are, running these companies at the top, but they can't get rid of the workers. The worker is the hardest thing to get rid of, right? They're going to need the workers, and that's why it needs to be.
Seth, you're literally working. Seth, you're using your education, everything you have. You're working right now, super hard. Why?
So hard.
Because you love it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's like
here's the thing.
Can't get rid of the worker.
The thing about the CEO thing is, CEOs have one of the most important jobs, and it's not some arbitrary job. Their decisions determine the life or death of the company. That's why they get paid the big bucks. If you make good decisions, we double. If you make bad decisions, we go bust. And all of us lose our money, and society takes a hit. All because of your bad decision. And how do you make a good decision? Can you teach a robot to make a good decision? Decisions are like one of the most hardest things in the world. That's the essence of wisdom. How do I understand the truth? There's billions of variables. I got to project these truths into the future, infinite uncertainty, and then I got to navigate the good path through all this ocean of data. That's almost impossible of a task to try to navigate that space.
Man, that's what my drone does when it follows me around. Are you kidding me? Like that's like all literally decision making. Like that's what it's good at.
Drones are way
I think
than the job of a CEO.
Like people are confusing LLMs with RNNs or with different systems that are better. You can
RNNs are not RNNs are quite a bit worse than LLMs.
Right. I'm saying people's familiarity with AI right now is with very specific ideas about and theories of AI. They're not like like there are older, more rudimentary, more narrow forms of AI which work far more precisely for certain tasks. If you're trying to get certain kinds of things like, is this a picture of a cat? Or like, is this flying directly forward? Or is this, there are all sorts of ways for AI to use sensors to get those kinds of tasks. This is very different than asking it abstract questions that you're trying to ask it maybe about its like life and philosophy or whatever, but that's not the same thing. Like making a decision in the sense of like driving, like cars that can drive themselves, AI is pretty good at that compared to, being honest in a ChatGPT conversation. I think most people confuse the two things.
So, I mean, at this point, ChatGPT can it might help you brainstorm some options, but it's not, again, like Seth was right. It's not going to make the decision.
Again, though, like we're confusing like the idea of an LLM with there are better systems for more narrow AIs that have existed.
Yeah, but like an image recognition system is not going to replace a CEO,
No, but again, the collective network of real-time intelligence is going to automate any task that's ever been done before and nuance it with all sorts of ways.
I mean, just think about the economics. If it were profitable to create a like robot CEO, and that were more profitable than using a human, then there will already be companies that are doing that, and they would be winning. And maybe that will happen at some point in the future, but it hasn't happened
exactly
yet.
Exactly.
Well, can we flush out that CEO thing?
I don't know how much CEOs are
Thank you for inviting me, Andreas. I have to go.
Oh, okay. We're near the end. It's actually at the end of the show. Tiffany, do you want us to share a link or anything like that?
I should be more organized with that, but no.
Okay. Well, next week, if you want, you can come back. We'll do another Wednesday Ultra. It's awesome to have you. Thank you, and good to see you.
Thank you. You guys are all awesome. This is a good conversation.
Peace out. Sorry.
Yeah. So I have a question on the CEO thing. So your argument is that you absolutely have to have a CEO because he has to make sure there's profits for the shareholders, right? But why can't a structure happen? Let's say, there is shareholders, which I would disagree that you would even have those in my argument. But why couldn't that task be delegated to multiple people? Why couldn't those people just get paid less? Why is it that they have to be paid so much differently? Why is that necessary?
So in theory, any group of people could create a corporation where say a bunch of workers got together and then they said, we're each going to have an equal share of this company and we're going to work to make a profit and we're not going to have a CEO. We're just going to vote on all decisions. So there's nothing stopping them from creating that sort of corporation today in some of the United States or many other relatively free
There's examples of it, like co-ops exist, like co-op opportunity, like food restaurants. Unfortunately, a lot of the time they get purchased by bigger companies because the shareholders are like, I can sell out.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where money comes back in. That's what I'm saying. If you don't have the ability to buy that company, then there's no ability to sell the company.
Yeah,
all these problems go away.
But there's something to be said for the fact that if there's other companies that are more traditionally structured that are buying these co-ops, why isn't it the fact that the co-ops are buying the other companies? It's because the co-ops, generally speaking, haven't been as successful and profitable as these other companies that are buying them, I would argue.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a good thing. That's the issue. Like, so then if a farmer is getting paid less, like, so you look at like Safeway in California selling garlic from China in Gilroy, the garlic capital of the United States, and before this, the world, and displacing all the local farmers, right? This is the kind of thing that's done. And then you're like, oh, wow, the garlic is way cheaper at Safeway. Yeah, but it's at a cost of destroying, because it's making sure that it's like saturating the market with something that will replace any of the other dealers. It's a drug dealer market.
So what you're saying is that if a farmer in America is less efficient at growing garlic than a farmer in China, we should favor the farmer in the United States anyway because they're American?
Definitely not. But let me show you Chinese garlic real quick. Actually, that I don't disagree with that even necessarily. But if you look at Chinese garlic, one of the things you can always tell about it is like the way the bottom is shucked. And also in China, when they're making food for export, a lot of the food's grown in places really close to toxic waste where they're using the ground to leach out the chemicals. They're growing food like rice, and then they export that rice. And there's all sorts of maps that show, you know, where this stuff is coming from. So yeah, like it's certainly like a lesser quality than this organic garlic that's been hand by grandma cultivated and bulbed to be larger. I mean, it's essentially evolved to be a special thing. Same thing with artichokes and everything else in the area. These are unique things that took centuries to get to the point that they are. And now someone's making a cheaper, lesser version of it that is probably not going to last. I mean, if you look at examples of this, would be the banana again republics, where the banana is extinct, right? Are you familiar with the Michelle Gross banana? Most have never eaten it in their lives.
This is the song, yes, there are no bananas. So there are no bananas today. You remember that song?
Yeah. No, but I'll have to listen to it now because, like,
it's just
there are no bananas.
How like there's no bananas because the old banana went away. It got killed by a fungus, right? And the new one, the Cavendish, is getting killed by a fungus too.
Yes, we have no bananas. Oh, I feel like, yeah, deep in my mind, this is in my brain. Okay, this is going to be important. I'm really grateful for this.
So if the garlic consumers prefer the Chinese garlic because it's cheaper and they care more about that than the quality considerations that you mentioned, shouldn't that be the consumer's choice?
Well, if you got to go a little bit deeper. So, like, I am Governor Jerry Brown, Governor of California. He made deals and also did this thing where there was the apple moth spray, and so there was no. It was like a weird kind of some kind of bug. There was some kind of bug that was going to eat everything. It's like a gnat or something like that. So no, it was like a fruit fly. It's a fruit fly. So what they did was they got radiated male fruit flies from Mexico. And then they released them in California. And the hopes were that when they bred, they were sterile, so that meant they wouldn't breed. Unfortunately, it turned out not to be sterile. So then had these super virile Mexican fruit flies that bred, and it destroyed all of California agriculture, particularly bad. I mean, you know, it was one of those situations where, like, if you had lots of money and you had like insurance and something like, I'm sure you were fine. But if you were like any number of normal, like 70% of California farmers, it completely destroyed Californian agriculture. And then as soon as you could grow food again, after this crazy blight, all these things have been replaced with these supermarkets, which have started moving in, Safeway, Dominick's, whatever, which are now all one supermarket. And they sold, exported from China through deals which Biden, Governor Jerry Brown, and Governor Gray Davis all had connections to some Chinese firms that were growing this. So it made it possible for them to import, export these new laws that didn't exist at that point. And there's the simultaneous with that, you have cars, Honda, all these things that were coming in. This was the end. So at this point in California, in the 70s, you had your own organic it was default organic. No one even considered it. It wasn't a big deal, whether it was or wasn't, but a lot of things were. You had all sorts of unique fruits and vegetables that no one had ever seen before. You had local cattle, that was diverse and like healthy, goats, everything like that. You had Armalite making machine guns, which were, some of the best in the world. You had surfboard manufacturers. Basically, it was just this crazy happening place. And then all of these things it was all of a sudden impossible. You couldn't economically compete anymore because they figured out how to build this system where it was outsourced to China. So, you could say it's one thing or it's another thing, But it's the rainforest again with Coca-Cola. Like they can do several things at once. It's a corporation with a CEO that's being paid a lot to scheme. They can.
I mean, the story about the apples or the gnat kind of reminded me of like the birds in China.
Oh yeah,
like you know the story.
Yeah. I have people that won't believe that story too. Like, because I grew up in California, I know like communists are like, that is a lie. And it's like, I'm pretty sure, buddy. Like, I said, sorry.
Yeah,
but
it's millions of people died
for one reason or another. Like the birds are one. There's all sorts of issues. Like the birds cause ecosystem disaster, cutting down certain kinds of trees, growing other kinds of trees, erosion, certain kinds of storms, new environmental disasters, like rivers that were lost, entire parts of China that were droughted, new deserts formed. Yeah, it's crazy if you just look at the feedback loops of China in the last century. But it's, again, like a lot of the disasters are actually post-Mao. And, so Mao's, bird disaster is pretty bad. But the things that were done because of outsourcing in China since Nixon are insane, right? And it's only in the last 8 to 10 years with the Green Party with, not the Green Party, what's it called? The Green Peace or whatever. Like, I'm talking about the green thing, the like environmental group. Green.
Keep getting hicked out. I have to hit reload and then
Greenpeace.
Greenpeace, yeah, Greenpeace. So Greenpeace, I've always thought, all these things are fronts for the Illuminati or some, dude with a lot of money who's like philanthropic, whatever. But in the weird circumstance that China has this Gorbachevian law that 51% of any collective group is owned by the state, Greenpeace could only be in China if 51% of it was owned by the state. And all of a sudden, Greenpeace China started doing, with state control, amazing things in cleaning up China in ways that the rest of the world's never seen before. I mean, literally the way Japan will rebuild a road in a day, China's been cleaning water, building apps that tell you every city what kinds of chemicals are coming out, removing those chemicals and like tracking down where they're coming from. And this is all because the state's involvement with this Greenpeace organization, which, Greenpeace without the state, you go to Peru and like they've destroyed the Nazca lines and all these other things. Like I don't know. I love the idea of horizontal collective, but I sometimes think we might need some sort of an elite oversight anyway.
Yeah, I think in this modern age, there's just way too many technological problems that make anarchism just impractical. The whole GMO seeds where they're pollinating and the pollen, it infects other crops. It's like, oh, now we can genetically engineer food that infects all of our food supply. Like, that's a really dangerous technology that needs to be regulated. Under anarchy, it's just, you just poison everyone's food supply with a genetic product.
Yeah, I guess that's a matter of perspective. From my view, the world's too complicated for the slow government that is like has no incentive to do the right thing and is just there to like suck up money and over-regulate everything and not really do anything of value.
I don't know. I think the government has the incentive. Like there's a Chinese phrase that says the people are like the water and the state is like the boat. The water can support the boat, but the water can also rock the boat. Like the Chinese, they have this ancient concept of the mandate of heaven. If you look out into your society and everyone's happy, they're eating, they're well fed, things are going smoothly, then that is evidence that the state has the mandate of heaven. But if you look out, you see starvation, homelessness, misery, that's evidence that the government has lost the will of heaven. And that means that the people have the right to rebel and revolt and replace the government. And that's the fear. The government has a duty to satisfy the people or else, you know what I mean?
And from a computer science, like information theory perspective, democracy, like voting on candidates, is like the most inefficient transfer of information from the people to government mandate possible, because you only have one bit. You know what a bit is? It's just a 1 or 0. I'm going to vote for the Democrat or Republican, and that's a 1 or a 0. And
binary,
every candidate
very
has
controversial.
Every candidate has just a hodgepodge of issues that they're advocating one way or the other, and the other one has a different hodgepodge, and you can only vote between those two sets of options. That is very, very inefficient. Whereas in a free market, where instead of those decisions going through a government, you can vote directly on the things that matter to you in your life. I can choose which car I want. I can choose which house I want. I can choose which toothbrush I want. I can vote with my dollars on every single thing that I care about, rather than having just one bit yes or no in a polling station once every year or whatever. So
I would just argue it's less than a bit. That's the problem, is they don't give us actually one bit. They give us like 1/1,000,000th of a bit.
Yeah,
and then they take the 999.
Absolutely, I agree. Have you guys heard of Arrow's impossibility theorem?
Which one? Zeno's
There's
impossibility?
a theorem called Arrow's impossibility theorem. I don't have it memorized or anything, but you can get the book. But it basically talks about how there's a theorem where it's basically proven that you cannot combine the wills of
of course,
people into one will in a way that complies with certain conditions,
unless you like raise them by wolves so they never know lasagna, pizza, and spaghetti, and then you give them exactly what they objectively should desire with AI.
Is that only based on a simplistic voting system? That's not a gradation of...
Well, I think it's a theorem about like any possible voting system, pretty much. That it's impossible to get the things that
cardinal voting is the we need cardinal voting. That's so British. I don't want to do that. No thanks. No cardinal voting.
But even cardinal voting, like basically the theorem proves that any voting system at all is not going to be able to give you the basic things that you would think you would want. And
the market is the way. Just like vote with your dollar. All right, I'll give that. Okay. Do you have any links you want me to share, Nathan? From your, because we're about to close down. I was going to pull up also
Mises Institute is my favorite, I guess, in terms of defending like anarchism.
Which one? I was going to give you yours.
Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with Mises.org, but
the Mises Caucus.
Yeah, I met some people
I may know some. I may be familiar with some of the Mises Caucus.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Well, it's not just the Mises Caucus. I mean, Mises Caucus is actually a new thing. The Mises Institute has been around for a long time, and it's basically a think tank composed of basically anarchist economists, libertarian economists, and they have like the Mises University every year where students can go and learn about things like the business cycle theory, where it's like an alternative to the Keynesian view of economics, where it's just assumed, well, if the government spends more money when there's an economic downturn, that's the right thing to do.
God, I wish I had AI in 2008. I would have made so much Ron Paul stuff then. I guess it's time to do it now.
I was totally just a run-of-the-mill Republican in 2008, so I've changed since then.
Yeah. Do you want to share your website? Or I mean, that's cool you shared the Mises Caucus, but did you want to share anything from your
Sure. I mean, my company, you can go to deepmm.com and then it redirects to the marketing website.
DeepMM?
Yeah, that's the company I run. So it's like AI software for corporate bond traders, basically on Wall Street. So we're early stages, but we got our first couple of customers. So
sweet. Epic. Dudes, check out DeepMM, follow them, and then make sure you go to Transcendent Philosophy so you can follow all of Seth's new work. He's been doing some pretty sweet videos. Baby. Oh, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've been doing some stuff on objective morality lately, but I think I'm going to be transitioning towards some free will debates, and then maybe back to the topic of wisdom.
Nice. Yeah, so make sure you guys watch Transcendent Philosophy. I'm going to try to force you back on the show some more, and there's some more stuff that we're going to do. I think we're going to do another free will thing pretty soon with some of the APMers, so that'll be cool. Giant, do you have any closing thoughts and feels?
It's good to be back on the show. It was great talking with you guys. I know I get passionate about my idea. Maybe we'll suss it out a little bit more next time, huh?
I'm into that.
We thrive on the passion.
Good to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. Good show. Thank you.
Take care.
I just want to say
Oh wait. What?
I just want to say I'm the most patriotic. You lose.
Yeah, you did a really good job.
You're definitely more patriotic than me. I'm like, yeah.
I'm freaking Des.